Okay, hello. So our survey won't be done by till Thursday. So there were a couple of things that were mentioned in your text that I wanted to bring to light. The semester's going by quickly already because we cover a lot of material in a short amount of time. But one of the really cool things about your text is it wastes no time into discussing actual techniques to work with adolescents using. So, in other words, if you turn to page 40 in your text, which is part of chapter 2, and it looks at evidence-based outgrowths. So, evidence-based practices, or as your text uses the term outgrowths, are actually nuances of bigger theories. So I've had other classes where people have really struggled noting the difference between a psychological theory and an evidence-based practice. So for instance, evidence-based outgrowths here in your text, evidence-based practices, they note dialectical behavior therapy on page 41. On page 42, they discuss rational emotive behavior therapy, the ABC technique that was mentioned earlier on. It also mentions trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm actually trained and supervised in that particular technique. It talks about mode deactivation therapy, MDT, and then acceptance and commitment therapy. So with each one of those, there have been studies, and they've actually, kind of like you do with a controlled trial for a pharmaceutical, where you'll give somebody like a placebo, and you'll give somebody else a pill for depression, and somebody else another pill for depression, and then compare the results of all three to see if they've alleviated those symptoms. So just like that, these different modalities, these different evidence-based practices, I'll call them evidence-based practices or techniques, EBT, EBPs, that's interchangeable. Don't really use the outgrowth term, but anyway, I did want you to be aware of that. I'm excited that your text jumps right in, wastes no time into hands-on application into treating adolescents. So that's very exciting for me. One of the things I'd like to, for those of you that are new, I know I have a lot of undergraduate students, so I wanted to take you through an offshoot or kind of a modification of Albert Ellis. Ellis is the one that gave us the REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, and he's actually the one that in your textbook formulated the A, B, C, and you dispute the belief leading to a new effect. So A would be kind of like your stimulus. If you're familiar with Skinner, and you have you have stimulus response. That's a very easy way of understanding behavior. It kind of takes the brain out of it takes cognition out of human behavior. So of course that was from B.F. Skinner, the Skinner box. Skinner actually applied this to human beings as well, which a lot of theoretical work after Skinner really says that's inappropriate to take the human mind, the cognition part out of, the thoughts out of stimulus response. We're all just reacting to our environment. No, humans can contemplate. Humans can contemplate decisions. We can give ourselves choices. Skinner would say, no, there's no such thing as choice. Ellis, however, gives us CBT, which is not just Skinner, which is behavioral therapy, which would just be the BT. Ellis gives us cognitive behavioral, and Beck does as well. I'm probably closer to Beck than I am to Ellis. But CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And this is how Ellis plays his particular model out. So A would be an activating event. Otherwise known as a stimulus. B, you have a belief about that particular event. The B reflects our internal beliefs, our thoughts about, okay, what does that event signify? So for instance, if you're looking at adolescence and you're sitting around the lunchroom and it's during school, and a peer comes up that you're friends with, and they're carrying their tray, and they walk by, and they don't say anything to you. So automatically, there's the activating event, the stimulus is the peer, the friend walking by without saying anything. So automatically we have thoughts or beliefs about that. You know, what would be a thought if you had a friend that walked by without saying anything to you? I wonder if they're mad at me. I wonder if they're having a bad day. You know, so you have a belief. So a lot of times adolescents are very egocentric. They don't see other people's perspectives very well. It's one of the hallmarks of adolescence. So they may have the belief that, wow, they're mad at me. I wonder what I did. And so C would then be a behavioral consequence. A, B, and C. So the consequence would be, well, fine, I'm not going to talk to them when I sit next to them in fourth hour. In fact, I'm going to move chairs so I don't have to sit by them. So you can see that's a very emotionally charged response, but it comes from possibly irrational belief. So if you're doing counseling with that person, so let's say they have a free hour before fourth period, and they come to the school-based counselor, and you sit down with, let's call this person Bob, and Bob, you know, I guess you're upset about your friend. Yeah, you know, forget them. I'm not sitting by them next hour. They can kiss my, you know what. I'm going to forget them too. I'm going to move over there and not sit by them. So I would then, in therapy, dispute this belief. Well, you know, a lot of people, when they're having a bad day, start to internalize their thoughts. They may not see other people, and they may start acting grumpy. They may start being irritable. And it may have nothing to do with you whatsoever. And so, by disputing, then you produce a new effect. So instead of going in and sitting across the room and not talking to the person, what might be a new effect by this? Well, I guess I could go over and talk to them and see how their day's going. And then if they're grumpy, if they're mad at me, then what should you do? If they're mad at you, what should you do? Or if they're having a bad day, what should you do? Well, I guess I should sit by them. If they're having a bad day, I'm going to go ahead and sit across, or if they're mad at me, I'm going to go ahead and sit across the room. So that it's really simple. Now, there's a technique called think, feel, do, and it really is, it's very similar. It's the same kind of premise to Ellis's REBT. And so you'll run across this in therapy. And so the way that think, feel, do works, it's also known as the cognitive triangle. I like it better because it's more visual for adolescents to get. So, in other words, it's the same premise. An adolescent has a thought. He's mad at me. What's your feeling? Well, I'm annoyed. And I'm angry too. I don't like to, anger is always a secondary emotional reaction. It's more of a physical reaction. What do you feel? Well, I feel sad because underneath the anger, I feel sad. So what are you going to do? So I'm gonna move away. From him in fourth period. Okay, so there are two places in the cognitive triangle that you can intervene. The first place, and this is where Ellis would want us to intervene from the ABCDE model, would be, okay, what can you think? Well, should you automatically think he's mad at me? No, I could think he's having a bad day. Does that change the way you feel? Do you still feel annoyed? Do you still feel sad? Well, no, I don't really feel those anymore. What do you feel? Oh, I feel concerned. I don't want anybody to have a bad day. Okay, so would that affect how you're behaving, what you're doing? Well, yeah, I'm not going to move away from him in fourth period. So what should you do? Well, I'm going to ask him how he's doing. Ask him if he's okay. So you can see on that sort of intervention, very basic intervention, very useful for teens, very visual, very concrete. Even kids that are preteen, 12, 13, even 10-year-olds a lot of times can get this. So I strongly suggest, and again, this is, if I refer to the TFD cycle, I'm referring to the think, feel, do cycle. It's basically parallel. It's very similar to the ABC model directly from Ellis. It's basically the same thing. So hopefully that little snippet will help you in application.